The airport buzzed with life. People rushing, announcements blaring, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. I sat stiffly in a plastic chair near Gate 32, gripping my boarding pass like a lifeline. My flight to Africa left in an hour. I should have felt excitement. Instead, there was a tightness in my chest, a weight pressing down. The past year had been a blur of loneliness, my home echoing with silence after my divorce. I had spent decades being a wife, a mother, a caretaker. Now, I was just me. And I had no idea who that was anymore. This trip wasn't about adventure. It was about survival, a desperate attempt to outrun the void. Someone dropped into the seat beside me. A man, tall and confident, with an easy, self-assured air. He glanced my way, then flashed a smile that was too genuine to ignore. "First time to Africa?" he asked, his voice rich and steady. I hesitated before nodding. He stretched out a hand. "I'm a guide. You'll be in good hands." I blinked. A guide? My guide? His presence suddenly made this whole thing feel real. He noticed my hesitation. "Trust me, Africa changes people." I didn't answer, because deep down I knew I wasn't sure if I wanted to be changed. The Jeep bounced over rough terrain, each jolt rattling through my spine. Dust swirled in the air, the heat pressing down like a heavy blanket. I gripped the doorframe, my knuckles white. Across from me, the guy drove effortlessly, one hand resting on the wheel, eyes scanning the horizon. "You okay back there?" he called over the roar of the engine. I forced a nod, just taking it all in. And I was. The endless stretch of golden grass, the distant silhouettes of elephants moving in slow, deliberate steps. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Raw, untamed, infinite. "You don't talk much," he said, glancing at me through the mirror. "I used to," I admitted. "Life just got quieter." He didn't press, just nodded like he understood. Later, we stopped near a watering hole. The others in our group wandered off, snapping photos, but I stayed near the Jeep. He leaned against the hood, watching me. "You remind me of people who come here looking for something," he said. I met his gaze. "And do they find it?" He smirked. "Depends on what they're willing to lose." His words lingered as I turned back to the horizon, the weight of them sinking in. Nights in the savannah had a strange kind of silence. Not the empty quiet of my home, but something deeper, filled with distant calls of animals, the crackling of the fire, the low murmur of voices. I sat a few feet from the flames, absently stirring the embers with a stick. He sat down next to me, close, but not too close. "You seem different tonight." I shrugged. "Just thinking." "About what?" I hesitated. "How life never turns out the way you expect. You plan, you sacrifice, and then one day you realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore." He was quiet for a moment. "That's why you came here." It wasn't a question. I exhaled, staring into the fire. "Maybe." "Change is scary," he said, leaning back on his elbows. "But staying the same? That's worse." I looked at him then. Really looked. He was younger, full of life in a way I barely remembered feeling. And yet, something in his eyes told me he understood things most people his age wouldn't. The flames cast shadows across his face as he smiled. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight." For the first time in years, that thought didn't terrify me. The morning air was crisp as we climbed higher into the hills. The view stretched endlessly. Golden plains, scattered acacia trees, a winding river cutting through the land like a vein. I took a deep breath, letting it settle inside me. He stood beside me, hands on his hips, watching the same horizon. "You ever think about what comes next?" I sighed. "I spent my whole life doing that. But now, I don't know." He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. The wind picked up, brushing against us, and for a brief moment everything else disappeared. Then it happened. It wasn't planned, wasn't questioned. It just was. A decision made without words, without hesitation. A moment that belonged to no one but us. And just like that, reality snapped back. I took a step away, my breath unsteady. This, we shouldn't have, but we did, he said simply. I looked at him, searching for something, regret, doubt, but there was none. Just quiet understanding. The weight of it pressed down on me as we turned back, neither of us speaking, both knowing that things had shifted in a way we couldn't take back. The drive back was silent. The kind of silence that wasn't awkward, but heavy, like unspoken words were pressing against the windows, trying to escape. The air between us had changed, but neither of us dared to address it. At the airport, he helped me with my bags, just like he had that first day. A full circle. I should have said something meaningful, something to acknowledge what had happened. Instead, all I managed was, "Take care." He gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. "You too." I turned toward security, but after a few steps, something in me rebelled. I looked back. He was still there, hands in his pockets, watching me go. And that was it. On the flight home, I stared out the window, my mind playing back every moment. The endless savannah, the quiet nights by the fire, that single instant where I'd let myself forget who I was supposed to be. Weeks passed. I tried to move on. Then, one night, a notification popped up on my phone. A news article. I clicked it without thinking. And there he was. A photo of him standing in front of a brand new safari business, the headline announcing his success. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. And then, something even stranger happened. A message appeared. "You told me life never turns out the way you expect. Maybe that's the point." I stared at those words, a slow smile forming. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't have to figure it all out just yet.